Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars and you're watching episode 132 of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm finally going to be applying some Solarez, I can't believe it's not lacquer, on this guitar. In fact, as I'm shooting this intro, I've already finished it. What I'm hoping to accomplish with this video is I want to try and entice you to consider testing the product. Now, it should be understood, I don't work for Solarez, they don't pay me, I have no connection to them whatsoever. I'm just a luthier like you, and I happened to stumble onto the product, and I'm very encouraged by its potential. And what the folks at Solarez, I think, need is they need more guys like me to be testing the product and then giving them some feedback on what they like and what they don't like about it, because as they have told me, this is a product that can be adjusted, modified, altered, and improved on. So they want to take all that information and figure out ways to make the product better. And they've told me about some ideas that they have for a whole product line that will be specific to luthiers. And based on my initial tests and some of my experience with this product has major promise. It's non-flammable. It has no odor. I mean, you open up a can and you really got to stick your nose in it to notice the odor. You could apply this stuff in your kitchen and no one in the household is going to complain about it. It contains 0 VOCs, which stands for volatile organic compounds, so it's safe for the environment. What it does contain, however, is 100% solids content, and that means every drop you put on your guitar is going to dry and cure there. With products like nitrocellulose lacquer, as well as the water and oil-based polys that we typically use, they contain about 30% solids content, with about 70% of it being liquid, the carrier. So in the case of nitrocellulose, that's acetone. So when you spray that on the surface, almost 70% of the product is actually going to evaporate into the air. And remember, with nitro, that what evaporates into the air is flammable and toxic. With this product, nothing is evaporating into the air. So one of the other problems that we'll have with those other products that we've been using is that in order to get a sufficient film thickness that we can level sand prior to buffing without sanding through the underlying wood, you have to lay down coat after coat after coat. And in the case of like nitrocellulose, it's not unheard of to be spraying 10, 12, 15, even 20 coats of lacquer. And of course that greatly extends the length of time it takes to cure the product. Now with this product, speaking of curing, it is UV curable. And that means almost rapid instant curing. Now, a lot of times with UV curing, you have to use special UV lighting systems and then hazmat suits and special eye protection and everything. Not with the Solarez. With Solarez, you simply brush it on and you expose it to ordinary, bright, unobstructed sunlight. And in about 60 seconds, it's cured. That's pretty incredible. And I've tested it, and that's a claim which holds true. I've even tested it in cloudy conditions, and I find that it still cures rapidly. Maybe not as fast as if it's in bright direct sunlight, but it will still cure. So that's one of the features of the product that really attracted me to it. Another nice feature of the product is the fact that you can apply it either by hand or with a spray gun straight out of the can. You don't need to do anything to it. You don't need to thin it or anything like that. In fact, the folks at Solarez recommend that you do not add anything to this product to thin it, otherwise you'll mess up the chemistry and it won't cure properly. Now, when I say apply by hand, that would normally mean like a brush, that sort of thing, foam brush, bristle brush. But I found it's better to apply it as thin as you possibly can if you're applying it by hand. And when you use a brush, bristle or foam, it tends to put the product down fairly thick. And you would think, well, that's okay, I'm going to level sand it anyways. But the problem is, even though it has pretty decent self-leveling characteristics, it will still kind of lay down a little bit bumpy. And when you go to level sand it, it can be pretty challenging. That being said, Solarez does sand very nicely. However, you know, there's only so far you can go with that, and if the surface is too rough, it's just going to be too much work. And I like to level sand with as few grits as possible. In fact, I like to level sand with one grit and then go right to the buffer. But when you apply it with a brush, it tends to get too rough, and it just takes too much work to level out. So what I've taken to doing instead is I'm applying it with foam pads. I'll put on a pair of nitrile gloves, and I'll pour a little bit of Solarez into a separate container, or I'll even use a brush just to put some on the surface, and then I'll use this foam pad to smooth it out and to spread it as thin as I can possibly get it. Now these foam pads, this is a foam makeup applicator pad. You can get these at any drugstore where they sell women's makeup. You usually get a bunch of them in a package. And they work great, and you can just level out that surface, and you'll find that once you've got one surface spread out and leveled smooth, or spread out smooth, your pad will be saturated with just enough that you can continue around the sides and then onto the back, and you're using very, very little Solarez to completely coat the entire guitar. And you get the surface really smooth enough to where, because of how easy it is to sand, I can level sand with a very, very fine grit. Now in this video, I'm just going to be talking about applying it with a foam pad rather than spraying it. I may talk about that down the road, but I've always felt if you can do a good job applying a clear coat by hand and get a professional quality finish that approaches what you would get if you were spraying, it must be a good product. So that's what I wanted to do for this video. And I also know that there are a lot of you out there who don't have spray equipment. You're always asking me, what is a good product that can be brushed or wiped on? And this one, I think, approaches that. So the first thing that you have to do when you apply Solarez is you need to make sure that the space that you're working in, the room that you're in, where you're going to apply it, is sheltered from direct and indirect UV sunlight. If there's any sun coming into that room, it could trigger a cure as you're trying to apply it, and that's going to be a mess. So you want to make sure that if you're in a room with windows, to draw the curtains, you know, pull the shades, that kind of thing, and just kind of close it off to direct and indirect light. I find even in indirect light, it can trigger a cure if it's bright enough. Then the next thing you want to do is make sure that the surface of the wood is spotlessly clean, and that's true with any clear coat product. But I find that Solarez does have a tendency to react with dust spots that remain on the surface. So I vacuum off the surface, I blow it off with compressed air. And then what I like to do is take a clean cloth and dampen it with some denatured alcohol, wipe down the surface, let that dry. Then I'll take an anti-static, I don't have one handy, it's an anti-static tack rag, and you can get those at your local hardware store where they sell paint supplies. You can get them at automotive parts stores where they sell auto body repair supplies. And I'll just wipe down the surface to get every bit as much of that dust, any dust that's left on there, off as I possibly can, so that the surface is dust free. And I'll do that right before I start to apply. Then I'll just dab some Solarez on the surface, and I will then spread it around using the foam pad and try to get it as smooth and even as I possibly can. And once I've got the entire guitar covered, I'll hang it up and let it rest for about 5 to 10 minutes. Let it kind of self-level and flow out a little bit. Then I'll take it outside and I'll cure it. And when I cure it, I expose each surface to direct bright sunlight for about a minute, and I'll do the front, the back, the sides, all of them. And once that's done, the surface is bone dry. Now this product, because it dries and cures fairly glossy, you may notice as you touch the surface, it has that kind of slick, squeaky feel. And you'll think, oh, it's not fully cured, but it is. And you might want to take a test piece out and try to get a feel for it, brush some on, cure it for a minute, and then take some 220 grit sandpaper and start to sand it. And you'll notice if it's cured, it's going to powder up right away. And it does. It powders up beautifully. So after a minute on each side, and once the entire surface of the guitar, all the Solarez has been cured, the next thing I like to do is I'll do a very thorough scuff sanding of the surface with 400 grit sandpaper. And when I say thorough, you want to try to get every bit of the surface sanded smooth, but you don't want to go too crazy, otherwise you will sand through and into the underlying wood. So you just want to give it a light enough sanding, yet thorough enough. Don't miss any spots, especially around the edges. And just lightly touch those, and then clean it off again. Totally clean it off, just like I did before. Vacuum, blow it off, denatured alcohol, tack rag, and apply your second coat. And then once that's a bit applied, take it out, cure it again just like you did before, bring it back in, and then this time, instead of scuff sanding with 400, you're going to scuff sand with 800. So you're taking a big jump up and just getting the surface that much smoother. And ideally what you want to do is you want to try to scuff sand it with, like the 800 grit to get it really smooth, so that the next application of the Solarez is going to lay down much smoother. Now I have noticed when I brush this stuff on, there are going to be some dust spots and lint spots and things like that. Don't worry about it. I've found that once you've built up sufficient number of coats and then level sand it, with the wet sanding process, and then buff it, those things seem to disappear, and I don't really notice them. So at first I was kind of freaking out about every little dust spot that I would see, and I was trying to do everything I could to remove them or to minimize their appearance. And I found later on when I would buff a test piece, they just disappeared. They weren't there. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And the number of coats that you're going to apply is really, it's totally up to you. It depends on your level of confidence in doing your wet level sanding after you're done without sanding through the underlying wood, and being able to achieve a polish, a decent polish sanding before you take it to the buffer. Now, in case you're wondering, I applied 6 coats of Solarez on this guitar, and I feel that that's adequate for me to be ready to start wet sanding the surface level. And this stuff sands so nicely that, and I have such a smooth surface that I believe, or at least a level surface, I'm pretty confident that I can start at about a P800, maybe a P1000. I don't know. I may start with a P1000, and if that's not good enough, I'll drop back to P800. But I use Eagle brand Kovacs wet dry sandpaper, and this sandpaper it's a P grade sandpaper. It has the letter P in front of the grit designation, and that means it's the European standard for grading sandpapers, and I just feel that those do the best job of level sanding and polish sanding prior to buffing. So that's what I'll do next. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the buffing machine. And I know that not everybody has a buffing machine, and I do know that there are some other folks who have used different buffing methods since they too don't have buffing machines. And what you can use on this clear coat product is, and that seems to work pretty well, is foam polishing pads. And what you would do is you would use like a this is a 3M Perfected rubbing compound. This is what you would start with. And then you would probably switch, after you're done with the compound, the rubbing compound, you would switch to like a Meguiar's polishing compound, and then finish off with, I use Stumax, their color tone swirl remover, but like a Meguiar's swirl remover. And each one of those products would have its own dedicated foam polishing pad, and you can use those in a drill. I've used them in a drill press, or you can get a car polisher and use that. And apparently you can get a pretty decent shine that way. But I'll be using my buffing machine, and I'm going to be using 3 different Menzerna solid compounds. I'll use coarse, fine, and then extra fine. And then each one of those compounds has its own dedicated stack of buffing wheels. And that's what I'll use to bring up the shine. And once I've done that, I'll come back and I'll show you the finished result. Well, as you can see, Solarez, I can't believe it's not lacquer, buffs out to a pretty decent looking shine. And I think, in fact, most people will see this and think, wow, that's amazing. That's what I want. And in terms of durability, I would say its scratch resistance is right up there with the best nitrocellulose products, maybe a little better. I do think it's better than most of the oil and water-based polys, maybe slightly better. It's not going to be as hard and scratch resistant as polyester, but nothing is as hard as and scratch resistant as polyester. So, but I would classify it as being roadworthy for sure. So, but I think as far as the gloss and the reflectivity of the surface, it's pretty good. Although I think I'm going to have to revisit my scuff sanding and my wet sanding technique to see if I can improve it, because right now the reflections aren't tack sharp. They're a little bit broken up around the edges, and as I look at it, I feel like I'm still seeing some of the drag marks from the applicator pad in the surface, and that would tell me I need to look at scuff sanding it smoother. And I think that spraying may solve some of that. So, I was hoping that by applying by hand, I could approach the same level of finish quality as you would get from spraying. And, I haven't really had a chance to do much as far as spraying. I've just kind of tested it in my HVLP gun. But I'll have to see if spraying is going to ultimately lead to a better reflectivity in the surface. The shine is great, but I would like to see tack sharp reflections, if I'm going to be going to the trouble of wet sanding and buffing. So, but other than that, I think most people will be really happy. And when you consider the benefit you're getting of being able to go from application to level sanding to buffing in a matter of 2 to 3 hours, that to me is just incredible. So yeah, I think it may be, for a lot of folks, that may be worth not having absolutely the most tack sharp reflections. But I'm going to see if I can solve it, and if I can, I'll get back to you in some future episodes. And I've been in conversations with the folks at Solarez about improvements to the product, and who knows, maybe there's something they can do to the formula to improve the way it flows out and the way it will ultimately buff. I'm not a chemist, so I don't know for sure. Now, before I sign off, I thought I would probably answer a couple of FAQs that I have a feeling will post up in the comments below. So one will be, can you tint this product? And I think the answer to that is no, because whenever you add something to a product like this, you alter the chemistry, and that can prevent it from curing properly. So I would put color down first separately, and then put Solarez just as a clear protective top coat. How do you clean up the product? Well, unfortunately, to clean up your brushes and spray gun and stuff, you have to use acetone. Now I know that's going to be a bugaboo for some folks. I know it is for me. And Solarez fortunately does sell a very low odor biodegradable citrus-based cleaner that I've actually tested with this product, and it seems to work well. So, and it's affordable. So if you buy some Solarez, I can't believe it's not Lacquer, you might want to throw in a quart of their biodegradable cleaner. Now, here's something to consider though. Since this product cures in ultraviolet light, unless you're exposing your spray gun or your brushes or your applicator pads to sunlight, it's never going to dry. I've been using the same applicator pad for several weeks now. I've used it in all my testing, and I used it on this guitar, and I haven't cleaned it. I just keep it in a part of my shop that doesn't get direct sunlight or even indirect sunlight. So it's never going to cure. So you might, for those of you who are thinking of spraying the product, you might want to consider picking up or using an HVLP or spray gun that is dedicated just to spraying Solarez. I can't believe it's not Lacquer. That way, you never have to clean the gun out. As long as it doesn't get exposed to sunlight, and you keep it stored someplace where it's going to be, out of direct or indirect sunlight, then it's never going to dry. So you would just have to keep adding a little bit of Solarez to it every time you wanted to use it. Since I've been testing this product, and it's been, over a month now, I think, I've never cleaned out anything. And I don't even have acetone in my shop. So, but I did test it with the biodegradable cleaner, and that seemed to work pretty well. So I think that's all I can offer up as far as the questions I think that will pop up fairly frequently. And oh, here's one. Sealer. I typically will only use a sealer if I'm using a water-based dye without a binder, but I'm almost always using a binder with my dye, so it's never really an issue. But Solarez is working on a sealer that complements this product, so I'll give you an update in a future episode when I've had a chance to play with a little bit. So, but really, I think that's all I've got for now. I hope that this video will entice you to want to try out Solarez and give it a try, give it a chance, and if you would be so kind as to share your experiences with the folks at Solarez, then they could maybe figure out ways to improve the product. Although I will say, as I think this video demonstrates, this product is pretty impressive. So that's all I've got for now. Until the next episode, take care, and we will see you soon.